part 2 today, this conversation will help you understand what's really driving the constant busyness and how to start breaking free. Welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm Kendra Nielsen, wife, mom, and licensed therapist. Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still exhausted and empty? Did you think life, marriage, and parenting would be simpler and more rewarding? Sometimes you just want to crawl back into bed and lose yourself in screen time and chocolate, rather than face that personal or family stress. You are not alone. This podcast helps you break free of the rat race and build a richer, more meaningful life, flourishing incrementally and realistically, improving your mental health and wellness, and living with deeper purpose beyond the mundane, no matter where you are in life's journey. Do you have any personal examples that you can think of, or even with clients, where they felt that way and how they got out of that? Something that they did to find that fulfillment again in maybe smaller ways.
I guess it just totally depends on what the person's value is, right? Like, this is my own experience where service is a really big value of mine. But when I moved here, and service can be like mentorship, volunteering, all that stuff. And when I moved to New York 8 years ago, moving is like a difficult transition. There's like visa things, like you're limited by what you can do depending on the visa you come on, and just like adjusting to a new city and all that stuff. For the first, like, I think 4 or 5 years, I really was not involved in any kind of service. But New York is a city that has a huge wealth gap, and there's many places where you can give outside of just writing a check. And so I think that I had to start really thinking about, why am I feeling so bad about so many? And one of the reasons why is that historically I had always been involved in some kind of service when I was living in Toronto. Whether it was through my job, I used to work at a shelter for homeless women, and that really made me feel like I was giving back to the community. But I really just wasn't doing any of that here, right? I was just going to dinners and that's it, like going to shows and stuff. So I had to find a once a month situation where I could go and be in service to others. And once a month was like realistic for me. And so I think that you have to really just assess what's possible for you, but you have to really be honest with yourself about what it is that you want. And if you are somebody who has a busy family life, sometimes it's really hard for parents to do something on their own because childcare is expensive. These are realities. Include your kids in it, right? If service is a value for you, for example, see once a month you and your kids can go and do something that's like service oriented. If once a month is too unrealistic, which it can be, maybe once a season. Make a holiday tradition where Christmas Eve you go to a soup kitchen with your children, right? Like, we have to be flexible about how we get there. So what we end up doing as people is we become flexible about what we get. Oh, you know what? I love service, but life is too busy. I'm just not going to do it. Like, we become flexible about our value and we become about our path. It actually has to be the opposite. We have to be flexible about the path and we have to be inflexible about the value. So whether you do it twice a year, whether you do it once a month, whether you do it once every Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, Valentine's Day is this holiday where essentially rooted in like Roman history, but it's effectively like just a capitalist holiday. And I'm not a hater of love. Don't misquote me on this, but it is. I started getting Valentine's Day ads in the second week of January. And I have seen some stores already put out Easter stuff, which is just alarming. We can pick a holiday of the year that is not that particularly meaningful to us internally and transform that into a holiday of giving. Like, a tradition my partner and I have is on Valentine's Day, he will donate on my behalf to sponsor education for a girl in an underprivileged society through the UNHCR for a year. So instead of going to a dinner that's $300 here for some food that I could get for $100 on a regular weekend, I get to support someone's full education for a year in a country where it's hard for young girls to get education, right? So it's Nigeria, Afghanistan. And that just feels more meaningful to me. So we don't have to fall into the capitalist desire to do something every holiday. We can actually make them more value aligned to us. And that can help us feel better and build a life that feels aligned. It's not always about blowing up your life and changing everything, right? It can be these small places where we can start to take some of our agency back from society that is telling us to do more, to buy more, to be more, to look different, to look better, right? And so I think these are things we can instill in our kids as well.
Definitely.
That was like such a tangent. I'm sorry, but I do feel like these are ways we can take some of it back because right now everyone is feeling super disempowered.
Oh, absolutely. And how you said it in that way, I hadn't really thought about it before. We're too flexible about our value versus our path. And that is like you're able to conceptualize that a little bit better. Talk to me a little bit more though about the guilt and the shame aspect, because I feel like when I think about sitting still and my clients talk about sitting still, it's just like, just can't even think about it without it being like, no, it's just not possible. Tell me about that.
We need to start at like the basic cellular level, right? Chronic stress keeps your body in fight or fight, freeze or fawn. Like it keeps you in those 4 responses. And any kind of stillness feels threatening to your body. And so we need to start at that level. And we cannot solve a crisis during a crisis, right? You can't teach someone to swim when they're drowning. So we have to actually do this in what I call peak time, right? So we have to build a regular habit of emotional regulation and physiological regulation so that when you do have 15 minutes, you're not frazzled, like alerts are not going off in your body where you're like, okay, gotta do something. Because what happens is then our thoughts get triggered and the thoughts are, you're lazy, you're missing out, you're not, look at that person. But the thoughts are the second step. The body feels it first. So if we can regulate our body, we can actually influence the kind of thoughts we have. And so daily practice of whatever way of regulation, right? Instagram tells you that you have to meditate or do morning pages or this, that, or the other. You can do anything you want as long as you do the thing that brings your body down regularly. So like for me, I know the days that I just have my breakfast and coffee in silence with no email or Instagram or news. Like those are just better days for me. Like I know that, right? So I have to key for them. And it's only 15 minutes. But if I sleep in just 10 minutes extra or whatever, like I can't get that. And I'm dysregulated the whole day. So now I can't sit still. I don't have patience for people's emails that are coming through. I might procrastinate. I'm not productive enough. And then that gives me a loop. So I think it's that. It's regularly making sure that you have grounding throughout your day, whether it's in the morning, at the end of the day, in the middle. And that can be meditation. It can be movement. It can be journaling. It can be an everything shower, right? It can be anything that brings your nervous system down.
Yeah.
That's the first step. Yeah. And I'll give a quick second step is keep a list of the things that you really like doing that just like a joy list, right? And the internet was calling it like a dopamine menu a couple of months ago, but like a joy list. Because what happens is people who are not accustomed to being still, people are accustomed to like fast pace and a lot of momentum. When they have empty time, it's like anxiety that takes over about what should I do to optimize it? What could I be doing to make the best out of these 20 minutes that I have? And then we become really frazzled and like we're choosing what to do and whatever. But if you have a joy list, you can just and pick one thing on it. And it doesn't have to be like lofty. Like right now, my list will remind me to read the book that I'm trying to finish. Right? And so I'll just be like, pick up Midnight Library and I keep it in front of me. It could be a puzzle that's on your dining table. It could be like a show that you really enjoy. Like something, just remember the things that give you some kind of joy. So when you do have time, you can not worry about what you should be doing and just do one of those things.
Yeah, just really maximizing your time and just focusing on that all the time. Same like you mentioned before, just being future oriented. Not so much that as that love that you're calling it a joy list. There's somebody that I listened to that talked about an audit. I just barely did this. I will track every month the things that I'm most proud of in my business and my personal life. And at the end of the year, I look at all those things. What do I want more of? What do I want less of? And essentially, I guess I'm, without even realizing it, creating a joy list. Like that could be long runs. That could be knitting and listening to music, whatever that is, just doing more of that. I appreciate that reminder to do that and setting things down. It also sounds like this part that you haven't spoken to yet in quite this way, but I'd be curious about your thoughts on it. It's like setting boundaries with yourself and others to protect what matters most.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about boundary setting, we often think that they're just for other people. We first need to set boundaries with ourselves. And that means personal accountability. That means making agreements with yourself and following through. Like those are the pieces that build a lot of self-trust and self-confidence. And then we can actually have the feeling of, wait, I'm actually capable of making change in my life. And that really just comes from having boundaries with yourself. So if you've told yourself, these are the things I'm going to do and I'm not going to do, or these are the things I'm committing to, making sure that you actually follow through with it, right? If you say, I'm going to leave a party at 8 because I want to sleep early, just doing that, right? And so much of healing in like the current zeitgeist is abstract and like it's something you passively consume. But healing is very much a verb. It's action in real time, not in the future, in real time. Even if it's 80% of what you said, even if it's 60%, but healing is just showing up to your life in the way that you told yourself you would. It's not about reading books and like saying and not doing the things and just thinking. I think that's a piece that's really missing. I spend a lot of time online, so I know a lot of the wellness discourse. And so much of the discourse right now is about becoming passive in your life. But healing is a very action oriented present tense thing. And it can be small, like I said, but it has to exist for you to change.
Absolutely. And I think it requires getting still to really be honest with ourselves about what areas need to be healed and how. When I do any guided meditation or anything with my clients and we really get still, it's insane to me every time how they know exactly what to do, but they busy themselves up so much so they don't have to focus on those things. It's uncomfortable for them at first.
Of course, it's uncomfortable. It's hard. It's very hard work, but that is also, I feel like personal accountability is like one of the most liberating things that we can do for ourselves. Taking responsibility for your own life, the mistakes, the successes, everything in between. That is like you literally being in the driver's seat. And while personal accountability is very uncomfortable, it is honestly one of the most liberating things.
Yeah. And with that, we're talking about something that our culture very much glamorizes and makes a badge of honor that you've already talked about. It is very hard to resist a culture where everybody around, you've shared many examples of how that shows up. Like people are constantly high-fiving you almost for your crazy pace. How can we maybe a little bit more, but let go of that culture, the pressure others put on us, the pressure we put on ourselves, maybe especially our families? Like it feels very uncomfortable to go against the norm.
Yeah, it definitely does. Because we're wired to stay within the norm, right? It's like we're fighting our own instinct to fall in line because historically that's what kept us safe and protected. This is like a very complicated question because it really depends on where people are in their own personal journey, what their role is in the family. It's hard to tap out of that pressure if you're the only breadwinner in the family. And that's a very real constraint. And we can talk about these wellness things in a vacuum, but that's not the way the world is working. Mm-hmm. And so I always say this because I want the people who do struggle through these very real constraints to know that it's not a personal failure if you're not able to do it. There are many limitations that people have. Just look at the news right now. It's wild, right? And so I think that when it comes to tapping out of the pressure, sometimes we cannot tap. And if you cannot tap out of it, what I say to people, and a really great example is you're the primary breadwinner, but you're in a really toxic work environment. But if you quit, you're going to not have any money to live, or anything like that. That's a reality for a lot of Americans. I think majority of Americans work paycheck to paycheck, right? And so the advice to just value align yourself and find your purpose and job and quit the bad job, like it's not realistic. And so I always say to people, build a life outside of work that it gives you so much resilience and joy that the toxic work environment becomes a small part of a bigger, right? So you have to work within your constraints. And this is a harm reduction approach from addiction treatment that I just superimpose on life, right? And so it's less about removing the bad thing and it's more about increasing the good stuff. So if your job really sucks and you're like around hyper competitive people at work that are constantly, I got this and I got that, blah, blah. Fine. If you can't leave your job, spend more time with your friends who are not like that. Spend more time in community, go out in nature, build a more robust life outside of, right? And so it's like thinking about where you can actually make change realistically in your life. So that's what I would say to people who are struggling with that. The second thing is find pockets of agency. We might not be able to stop the pressure from our parents because maybe we see them every week, but we can limit how much social media we consume and all of the data points of comparison and pressure that come in. Maybe we can alter our schedules so we see our parents every 2 weeks, if that's possible in your family, right? Maybe we can have conversations with our parents if your relationship is like that with them. It's not like that for everyone. Maybe we can limit the kind of friends we see, right? That you have to find pockets of agency and influence those pieces instead of trying to think about the places where you really cannot enforce change. And that's true for anyone, anywhere. Like even in our romantic relationships, 68% of our issues are unresolved, right? The success of a relationship depends on how well you can mitigate that difference, not for that difference to go away. So this idea that we'll never be uncomfortable or we'll never be faced with something that is uncomfortable is very unrealistic. And it's a hot take, I know, but I do think people have to be real about their limitations.
And I very much appreciate you speaking to that in a realistic way, because I think so many of us are like, oh, but I can't. Okay, there's always small things that you can do. I hadn't really thought about the way that you said it before. Those pockets of agency that work within your restraints and even limit things or increase things in small ways. And maybe that's not changing your job. Maybe it's not those bigger things, but it can be in the evenings, on the weekends, in the mornings, these small changes that we can make. Really appreciate those examples. And last but not least, I always like to ask, applying this to yourself and fulfillment in general, how have you personally created more space for rest or joy in your own life? And maybe something you haven't mentioned yet.
Last year, I really committed to my year of mediocre hobbies. So every 3 months, I intentionally selected something different and just vibed with it for 3 months. And it was super. So I was able to do that. I think right now things are a little different. So I try to protect the morning 15-minute thing a lot. It's not happening every time, but that is a priority for me that I try to protect. And something that I've been working on is it's really hard for me to work out regularly. So this year I'm really trying to make time for that. And rest, there's 7 different kinds of rest. Rest is not always sitting, right? There's spiritual rest, there's physical rest, there's emotional rest, financial rest, cultural rest, community rest, social rest. And so I think also thinking about rest outside of the most typical paradigms of rest can also be helpful. Making sure I make time to weight train is, even though it's physically challenging my body, it is something that gives me some rest and respite from the rest of the day. And so I think that's how I'm doing it.
I hadn't thought about reframing that even as exercise being rest or some of these other things. I'm like, oh, if it's on the calendar or it's like a spot that's not totally free, then it doesn't equal rest. But absolutely, it makes sense that it does. Amazing things that you shared. Keeping a joy list, exploring who you are if you're not busy, resolving some of those unresolved emotions. Focus on the process and not the outcome. Love how you talk about mediocre hobbies and some of these tiny examples of things that we can do. What can you limit? What can you increase? Work within those restraints. Talking about how healing is a verb. There's so many great things that we can focus on, and just reminders of how we can make these small shifts that will create more joy and fulfillment in our lives. Really appreciate speaking to those things. And last but not least, where can we find your book? Where can we reach out to you if we're interested in learning more?
Yeah, so my book is available everywhere books are sold. And if you're like an independent bookshop person, you can always call them and they'll order it for you if it's not in shelves. But outside of that, it's Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Target, and places. And my website is like the central hub of everything I do. So it's israanasir.com. And there's resources on there that are book related, but also outside of that. Everything I do is centered there. I do a lot of corporate workshops on toxic productivity. So there's a page on that as well. If you want to bring this conversation, if any listener wants to bring it to their workplace, definitely.
Okay. Sounds great. We'll put all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. I know how valuable your time is, and I'm grateful you chose to invest it here. If you're interested in taking the next step in your own personal and family growth, sign up for Find Your Focus and launch your podcast. Our courses designed to help you become a leader and start your own online business. Head over to fulfillmenttherapy.org to learn more, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Fulfillment Therapy for daily encouragement and resources. We'll see you back here next Monday with new episodes. Until then. Hey friends, if you enjoyed this episode, a quick 30-second share can help someone else find support and help this podcast grow. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts boosts visibility and keeps the show alive. Your simple acts make a big difference. I'll see you back here each week for more life-changing episodes.